Okay, maybe we can start when Juan is coming. Um, I want to start this conversation with are you familiar with the fact to talk with unknown people in the street? Jason, I know that you said something like that yesterday, and I really want to know more about that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's actually a kind of a little game or a hobby that I have with myself, where I think anybody has a unique gem. And maybe it's a very selfish thought, but if I could kind of uncover that gem and make the both of us feel better or share that space, then I think that it's a win-win situation, right? Because as a kid, I was always kind of taken aback whenever you got into an elevator, everybody just shut up. You just don't say anything, and I'm like, and then when I went on trains as I got older, you'd be sitting with all this humanity, nobody would say anything, um, and I was always kind of fascinated that I'm sure whether it's the grandmother next to you or the little kid, banging against your seat, there may be some interesting insight that could be had from either interaction. And so I've always tried to increase the probability of just being surprised. And actually, Andy Tudahope, um, I had a beautiful conversation with him a couple of weeks ago, how he said that he lives to be surprised. And I'm thinking, like, wow, like I live to actually kind of mitigate surprises in my life. But I think what he means is just discovery. And I think that's actually what I do when I try to go out and you know you've obviously heard of, like, Walmart. If everyone's standing in line in Walmart, um, because you're always standing in line in a Walmart, um, I always try to talk to the people in front or behind me, or whenever I'm in any store, to seeing, like, oh, what did you buy? Do you really like that hair dryer? Or and I appear like such a random, odd person sometimes when I do that, but I think it exposes me to how do I communicate better with people, um, right? But in the end, like, one time I was in a mechanic's garage, and there were people in the waiting room, and there was like an old lady, middle-aged lady there, and some random people, young, and I thought I could talk to the younger, like, men in my age, like, oh, we could talk about cars or whatever. But in the end, it was the older woman who I found out worked for the CIA, and we're like, whoa, like I'm retired now, but I used, I can't really tell you what I did, but and it was just like, wait, and I live in Baltimore, so there's a very strong defense agency in the area. A lot of people work for NSA or the Fed, or just private agencies, top secret stuff. So I guess for me, the chance is higher that I would have encountered something like that. But if you never reach out and make yourself vulnerable, or even, like, ask a stupid question and drive into those conversations, I feel that you're missing out a lot on life.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And it's funny because I find it much easier to do in those little moments in my daily life than on a screen with a ton of different people. You know, uh, but those little interactions, I've also had some of the most amazing, like, inspiring little moments, and met people that, you completely don't know what someone's life opens up to and who they are or what they experience, or, just at the beginning of the pandemic, for example, just like a coffee shop I go into often and would sit sometimes, or usually just grab something and sit by myself. Someone was joking, these two older men, and they were, making a comment of, oh, come and sit, because they were talking about something, and I thought it was interesting, and I just made one little comment, and they were like, oh, come and sit. And I took them up on it. And that ended up being, it was amazing though, because that ended up being a weekly, sometimes 2 times a week, but definitely once a week, where I would sit and I would meet with these men who were really interesting, and there was another woman who ended up coming in sometimes. And it just, it, we ended up like, it was something that never would have happened otherwise. It's those surprise moments and those I'm going to take you up on that. But yeah.
Do you think there was something about this particular cafe, like the setting or the, I don't know, the decoration or whatever, that made this possible?
Something, yeah, there is something in that. I think you're right.
Was it not a
There's
Starbucks? Was it a local cafe?
It was not a Starbucks. No, it was, and there's probably 2 coffee shops in the area that are similar, that have something similar about them that, and I think it's the community tables, actually. I'm not a Starbucks person, so I can't comment as to whether that would happen there as well. But, at least not the one in my neighborhood anyway. But there's like the longer, more community tables in the one, or it used to be anyway. Things are strange the last while. And then I also feel like there's something to do with the amount of light that was coming into the space. I don't know how accurate that is, but it felt warm, but also there was a lightness to it. Like, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it reminds me that sometimes we are also more open and we have light inside, like when you walk in the street and you just look at your feet, there is nothing that happen. But if you are aware and looking at looking at children's, the sight is very, very important. And yes, a lot of things happen when your body is open. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, there's also the right frame and context of a situation, which I'm a bit, I probably have a bit Asperger's or autism, that I really don't judge context very well. But I kind of embrace it and just kind of ignore sometimes things in the room and just kind of just go with the flow. But being able to break that barrier, I think, is really hard, especially in a post-pandemic or a transitioning pandemic society that we're used to, like, not being together. That maybe. So I'm putting my marketing hat on again, right? This is for you and Juan, Pauline. Like, they're just to give you some background, right? So I tried to develop a startup where I thought people were looking at their phones too much. People weren't. They're losing a bit of their humanity and their interconnectedness because they're on the phone too much. And so to kind of break that, I wanted to create a mechanism for people to kind of engage and learn with each other through kind of motion. So the solution that I thought would change and revolutionize was developing like an educational robot, like something that you could throw around and engage with, and it would like ask you questions, and then you could throw it back, and there'd be all different types of game dynamics involving kind of motion and learning with that. Long story short, we tested out. It actually worked really well, but developing a robot is actually harder than you think, especially if you're not in the hardware space. It just costs a lot of money. But one of the things that I think really kind of came out with that was the empathy, right? Empathy that you you really start developing in that situation. And one of the really surprising side effects that we observed in the classrooms, like, so we developed an app and people were throwing my phone around, was the empathy of the students trying to help out the ones who struggled, right? The ones that, like, oh, maybe they didn't, maybe they would ask them what's 5 times 5. And you would see the kid like deer in headlights, like, I don't know the answer, right? And then the entire classroom was like, all right, come on, like, it's 25. They would all try to help them out. And after the gameplay was done, it was kind of like a very, very excited, heightened, energy. But then everybody would kind of settle down and be like, there was kind of a collective, like, how team bonding, like glowing feeling kind of afterwards that I thought was pretty magical. So, to me, like, when you have these conversations, and it's how do you break that frame, that context to silence, which 95% of the people can't do, right? It's very uncomfortable. I just do it because I don't care. I've learned to live by absurd means sometimes, and
That's
yeah, that's my superpower is no shame, right? I've got no shame, especially if you dare me to do something too. But I think if you want to create those moments, how do you create like the right, like, if you go into like a yoga setting, like, oh, they create the right mood, and like, you want to relax, and digitally, maybe it's both aesthetics of an interface and both expectation of the user, and also maybe timing too, right? Like, my mom was recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and there's a sundowning effect, and so interacting with people late in the day or after sunset may not be as good as early in the morning, right? So they try to do a lot of the things in engagement in the morning time. I haven't interviewed, although I have talked to a few homeless people. I've actually wanted to go through some of the camps and talk to them more, but sometimes time didn't permit. But there could be some of those factors in it as well to create better conversation. Maybe after they've eaten, they'll have better conversations, right? A lot of things with schools. That's why you have free and reduced lunch. Kids don't learn well when they're hungry, right? I think there's a lot of different factors and context to flow into that. I know I'm just spouting out loud here. Shut me up when you need to.
No, it's great. But you reminded me also of, just the other day being at the bank machine, which I hadn't been to in forever. And there was a homeless guy sitting on the inside, and he wasn't very happy, but he wasn't angry or anything. He just, was kind of looking dejected and asking for money. But I didn't really have a lot of money to give him or anything. So the whole thing became more about the conversation and about that little moment. And the biggest thing that I noticed was it's the connection of care, because I actually cared about what he was saying. And, and that was, and I was like, and he talked about something about his health. And I was like, you really need to, I really felt inside, you really need to get that checked out. You can't, do you need help doing that? Is there some, and just that moment right there, that was like, something different happened.
Yeah. Do you know what made you care?
Thank you.
I care about people, and especially, if someone's, if it's a one-on-one and you're connecting and you make that eye contact, and there's that, I don't know if it's I've been thinking about this care quality and this like nurturing aspect of things a lot lately, because it's been whole kindness, this kindness to others, and this like just trying to raise my kid in a kind way, trying to, it's to do with that separation. There's so much separation. There has been so much separation that it's
Sorry, we have a problem with our. Can you speak now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Now it's good. Thank you.
Okay.
Christina, did you want to add something also?
Yeah, there's a few threads that have been running through the conversation that I would really love to sort of allow for transparency within my own experiences lately. These are huge lessons for me that have to do with this empathetic space, this membrane between us that allows us to have true coherence with one another. There's a couple of, the caring is huge. And I think one of the elements I'm discovering that get in the way of my own ability for empathy, or even for the real caring, even though I think I'm being caring in some exchanges, I end up finding out through the reactionary aspects of it that I wasn't as caring as I thought I was. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I carry expectations. And because of the very specific trauma that I'm experiencing in my life now, and I can't say it's not trauma because it is, and how I navigate it is certainly my choice. And I'm trying to navigate it as well as I can, but I do fall into these patterns of expectation. And I think when we're trying to meet each other's expectations, that's where it gets glitchy. But I also wanted to bring AI into this, oddly, because Jason, I too I've identified over time that I am probably on the spectrum, more than likely. And I have some difficulties understanding context as well, especially social context. I'm more of a nature girl. I can read nature. I can read the braille of nature. I can read the whispers of nature. But when it comes to people, and I have a really hard time navigating, and I really literally get myself into trouble a lot of the time. and so for me to be doing culture work right now is like, it's like, wow. So I've been really in deep with navigating this empathetic space. And there's this crazy tool that came up called iMogen. It's like a beta AI thing, and they take from this library of images. So you put a word phrase into a text, and then Imogen is this AI, and it tries to compose an image based on your text chain. And I've been playing a lot with it, and it's oddly helping me to learn. It's helping me to learn through my own language pattern what it is I'm actually communicating to people. And that was a major piece that was missing from my inability to navigate space, because I think what I'm saying is, and I'm a trained writer. I've been workshopped to death. Like, I get it about this interface between us for this transference of knowledge. And I get it so wrong most of the time. So anyway, I wanted to give a shout out to AI. It made me feel a lot more comfortable that it can be used as a tool, and that it's not part of that feedback system. It's a neutral feedback system. So I think it helps people like me to not be so fearful and have those expectations that are just fear feedbacks. Anyway, I'm talking too much, but I just thought I'd offer that.
Oh, there is no talking too much.
No, yeah.
I wanted to say that sounds very cool. If you can share a link about it or something. But I also want to say, like, I don't think neutral exists. Even if it's an AI, it was created by a human with certain biases and mental structures. Yeah. I wanted to comment on something Jason said earlier about the thing they did with children and how the whole classroom wanted to help. You know? And it's really interesting that we are by nature cooperative creatures, you know, and then school takes it out of us and turns us into competitors.
This worries me a lot. And this is something I think about a lot
You shall
is
not
the school
copy
system.
in your exam.
Yeah, so many
That
rules
doesn't make
around
sense.
engagement and what should be right, what is a right way and a wrong way to explore, talk to each other, experience your body even.
Have you guys read Milovich or apparently the kernel curriculum is based on a lot of his writings. He wrote Deschooling. I haven't the book. I tried looking for the book. It wasn't at my library. I generally don't like buying books. I like getting it in my library because I tend not to get rid of things. So anything that I buy ends up with me forever. But this one I might end up buying. But he's like a 1970s, and Andy Tudehope was saying that a lot of the kernel curriculum is based on was it Popovich, Milo Popovich? Maybe I'm getting the name wrong. I will look it up for you guys. But it's definitely cited in some of the curriculum. But I think it's an advocate of like homeschooling, which, my wife is an ESOL teacher, so I hear. So I'll make one point. Like when people think about education, and I think it's a huge mirror image fallacy in the U.S. because everybody or most people went through kind of K through 12 education in the U.S. They think they know what it takes to be a teacher, but that is far from the truth. I had that same bias myself. That we're going to make an education robot. I already know the education side. Maybe focus on the robotics side. Well, education. Oh my God, that is so multi-layered and so many different theories and practices. But anyway, I get a lot of my direct feedback from my wife, who is an ESOL teacher. So she teaches people, kids who are not English first, native speakers, right? And so she gets it pretty much to deal the bottom or the most adverse kids in her school, and it's just interesting how our assumptions about education. And I totally agree, right? Education. How do you, from a government perspective, scale and roll that out? I think obviously smaller class sizes, smaller units are very, very beneficial, but just due to budgets, sometimes you can't do that, right? Maybe the priorities aren't set appropriately. But yeah.
Well, if it's peer learning, it could happen.
Correct. So one of the major trends that she sees is that the second graders, if you ask any teacher, at least in the US or maybe in the world, who elementary school teachers, which is the worst performing grade in the whole school is, they will tell you it's a second grade. And the reason why is they've missed the intro years of schooling. And so they've never been introduced in that. How do you work with people in groups? And so now they're older, they're a little bit bigger, a little rowdier, and they are just wreaking havoc in the school because they're like, kindergartners, but bigger and rowdier and stronger. And they haven't been onboarded in what it's like to like get in a line, take your turn, share here, share there, right? So I was telling another kerneler that I met, like if he wants to work on a grant, like there's going to be this hump of like second grade cohort going through society that is you're going to see like a rise in disruption and crime and whatever, right? Just because there's this people who haven't been onboarded into like quote unquote traditional society the way that you would have expected.
I think I missed the, like, why haven't they been onboarded? You mean because of the whole COVID thing, or what? Sorry.
They missed
Why is it
kindergarten.
grade 2 and
They missed kindergarten and first grade, right? They're jumping
because of the last few years.
Yeah, and they're jumping in person.
Okay,
They were
got
all
it.
virtual. They were all virtual.
Yeah.
Like kindergarten and first grade, and now
Yeah.
you can't teach how do you share something remotely, right? I guess maybe you could do it like through a digital game.
Wait, but they live with a family, right?
They do.
So
But
how come they don't learn that with their parents and their brothers and sisters?
a lot of these ESOL, like, they may, I mean, some of them may be living with 8 other brothers and sisters, but a lot of them are, the mom and dad, they don't care. Like, they're not even at home a lot of times, right? They may be working nights. I mean, the stories are far and wide, but a lot of the times, interacting with family, I think is different than interacting with people outside your family. If you look at like just the difference of like only children to like, middle child to oldest child, there's difference in how psychological traits develop with your birth order, right? But yeah, if you haven't been onboarded into school as a kindergartner, you've missed the boat. Now you're a little. Same thing with literacy, right? If you're in high school and you're not literate, you've got like a 95% chance you're going to end up in jail or like have a crime, right? I mean, there's just these metrics that are tracked with education that are kind of frightening.
Do you know what I wonder? I think it's maybe it's that feeling of you feel like you are labeled left out. I feel like it's so much more in the label, because I don't know. I've been really interested in children's education, and I'm not a teacher. I'm not planning on being a teacher. I'm just, but I talk to a lot of teachers and I talk to a lot of parents, and this whole, there's such a confused paradigm happening with all of this, in that you have to learn, and I know literacy at a later age will definitely affect your emotional aspect of things, but there's such a pressure on people to feel like they have to be something at a certain stage, and they have to acquire a certain either level of skills or understanding, or fit into this pattern, fit into this box at a certain stage. And it's, I keep feeling the problem is so in this kind of space. And it goes also towards what Christina was saying about expectation and the expectation that you have, but also that other people put on you. And yeah,
I totally agree. And I feel like those people with like labels and expectations sometimes don't feel like they have an out to like save face and start over again. They just kind of continue down that acting in that role, in that position where, if they were, almost a reset to some degree. And I think a little bit of that is like a way to do that. Like, to me, a great example was, and I know Juan has heard me mention this, 1,000 times before, but there was a book by Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership, where he has a lesson of like in a Navy SEAL training, there was a boat, and this was like a really tough like obstacle course where you have to like carry like a log on your shoulder with like a team of 4 people, and then paddle a boat out in the sea and back, and it's a really grueling like event. And there was one team that was just coming in dead last every time. And there was one team that was just winning all the time. And so the commanders did an experiment like, well, why is the boat coming in last all the time? And why is this one winning? So they took the leader, the captain of the boat, who was winning all the time, and swapped them with the other boat captains. And to the one that was losing all the time, like, oh my God, like we're gonna win now, like because I was just with a bunch of like misfits and dead weight, and that's why we sucked, right? Well, it turned out when they swapped the leaders, the boat that came in last now won, right? And so he kind of demonstrated that it was really kind of the leader. There are no bad teams, only kind of poor leaders. And that's kind of the point that he makes, is that it's kind of an expectation and communication. And I think sometimes when you and I know I've felt this as a kid or even as an adult, like sometimes you're like casted in a certain stereotype. You're just going to act that stereotype, and like, I don't care. Like, I'm just going to act that and not really make a difference. But I think if the leaders, or in this case, kind of the structure of the system or the environment, like, hey, if they communicated properly to the team, like, hey, I don't care what you've done or what you've been, like, you can rise up and make a difference, right? As opposed to continuing down your traditional storied path. I know that was probably a hard analogy to jump to.
No, I feel like there's something really in that, because it's and I was kind of thinking about this before in like a little bit, like it's and I watched something earlier and we've all heard about it, but it's like this creating a space that is filled with gratitude and love. And they may sound simple, and it may sound, but like Colonel does it also in the conversations. And the point is, you're holding space from a caring place, from the questions being asked are thoughtful and not always hard to, I mean, you can take them to a depth to answer, but there can be a scope in your type of answer. It can, depending on where your place is or your moment is, or and that goes into expectation again. There is no expectation. It's just setting the tone.
I was wondering if we can, in our attitude, help others to get outside their label they have been wearing since a long time. And I think that I have some answers. Like, for example, you can show that you have different label identities and be okay with that. I can be a Web3 developer. I can be a dancer, and that's okay. And you can also be curious about the person. You see that he has an image, he has a way to talk, but is much more than that, and go for it to looking for what is more inside. And I think that we can help each other to show our different labels. And I was thinking also about anonymous people or pseudonymous people on the web who are saying, yes, I want to have several identities. I will call myself like that and myself like that, and I will go in this DAO and be like that in this DAO, and in another DAO I will be another me. But I'm like, why are you not showing us all you are? I want to know you in your whole. And so like
that's hard to do from my personal, to be one person and then be another person, and then like, but at the same time, it's really hard to show everyone what you are and the scope of what you are in such a small framework of space or time.
But that's more like a question of time or bandwidth, which is different from some people that tend to compartmentalize and do not show certain things. they have like their professional side, and then they have like their family side, and then they have their friends they go out to drink with side. And I remember a few years ago, at least here in France, people used to have like a personal Facebook account and a professional Facebook account.
Oh.
You know? And I was like, why do you separate yourself? Like, just be whole. And isn't there
hear you.
something in Web3? I think that separation is like breaking apart. You see like people that were before very like serious and enterprise like becoming more playful.
I'm curious how, like, what you're seeing, because that's really interesting. That's a, you know, I feel lucky to be in a field that I feel like the scope of, you know, your design, you know, and but in this type of space, we're around people that we play in so many different areas, you know, and it's not, although sometimes I may work with corporate clients, it's not a corporate segmented, but it can be. I'm not saying everybody is that way. And I guaranteed, if I think about it, have probably, like, you know, my family will see a different thing than, you know, people I'm working with, or but that's natural. No. Yeah.
It's difficult because sometimes, for example, if we talk to a lawyer, I can be a little bit more like, oh, I need to know how to speak and to speak as a regular, like a regulator, and not as me. So, yeah, of course, in the society, it can be very hard to not compartment ourselves.
Juan, Pauline, how have you tested the idea of people talking to random strangers over digital communication?
Can you repeat, please?
Have you tested or experimented with people, random strangers talking with other random strangers?
Of course. What do we do at Kernel?
I mean,
so well, now we are no longer strangers, but like 3 weeks ago or 1 month ago, we were strangers.
Yeah, but I'm talking more specifically somebody who's actually homeless with somebody who's not.
Oh, okay.
Like, I'm not, like, because like right now you're sitting in a nice home, you got coffee, you can go to the bathroom. Homeless person, you know, and there are plenty of them around Baltimore. You know, they're, you know, and I think you said that they would go to like some type of like video oracle or something to actually have that video capability. Like, because I don't think you can guarantee they're all having phones, right?
No. The idea is you or someone that does have a phone goes and has the conversation with them, and that person films both of them having the conversation.
Oh, the filming would be done of you guys having the conversation in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
it's not like they're doing a video chat like us right now. It's I think, yeah, it was you, Annika, who mentioned like you went to this coffee and two men in the table next to you started talking to you. It would be something like that, but just that you film it and then you post it to share with other people. Yeah.
What's what is the aim with it? I missed the whole this project before, and now I'm finding it really interesting. It's is it just to cut to it sounds like it's probably just to cut to the chase and like get to the soul of what that person is and have a moment of conversation, a moment of like transparency and Yeah.
Yeah,
And to capture that. Yeah.
It's get to know your neighbor. Yeah.
Okay.
And there is a recording every month, because we think that the first time, it's like in kernel, if we meet someone, it's the first time, okay, you have some part of this person because you exchange few words, but then it's a regularity that show you who is really this person, and we want to show to the world these stories, these conversations that are very meaningful, and yeah, that are gift, and we can like that know who are living in our neighborhoods, and and feel that we are part of, um, like they were our own family. And I wanted to add that if I had some conversations with homeless, yes. I remember when I was student, I met homeless in the street every time. He was next to the shop, so every time I was doing some shopping, I was talking with him a little bit. And I remember very well the day I broke my leg at skiing, and I came with Becky. How we call that, Becky?
Crutches.
Crutches, and he was like, oh my god. And he was not talking French very well, but he showed me that he was very worried about that, and we really create an important bond together. And yeah, and I also have a brother who had been in the streets for a few months. It was in Austria, and he wasn't feeling good at this time, and some people helped him, and asking if he was all right, and took him to the hospital. And like that, our family has been reached and reached. So we knew where he was, and so there is really this feeling of hopefully these people saw my brother, and just stopped and talked to him if he was okay, and he was not. So it's like we are living together in the same planet, and let's be a big family, okay? Like that, we are all okay, and we are moving together forward.
Yeah, I'd love that. I know, it's because that's a beautiful thing, that these people, these actually cared about your brother, and you want, like, I would want that for, I mean, I love where you're searching with this, because it's important, and like it's like asking those questions that go to the heart of things, like from that real place of care, like asking being willing to connect with your eyes and your, and I'm having a bit of this back and forth with my son right now, in that, like, I want him to say hi to people on the street. I want him to feel like he's not afraid of people. You know what I mean? Like that. And there's this double in that, because I don't want him to, to be like randomly running off and being with strangers and that. But at the same time, I don't want him to be afraid of strangers. And this duality, this like moment of when is it okay and when is it not, is
Yeah. I remember very well. We had a friend who has a same 5 years old child, and he ran to see a homeless with very bad clothes, and he made him a hug, and her mother was like, okay, you can go, but no, but it was this duality that she was talking about, like, okay, it's so cool, this love for humanity, but I'm scared and I don't know as a mother how to do. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the
I would love to
question is
continue this
how do
conversation,
we,
but I have to run to go pick him up. So if you do it again, please, I will. Yeah,
Yeah,
of
sure.
course, we will do more.
Thank you for coming. Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah. So, yeah, yeah, I see what you're trying to do here, and I'm wondering, like, what experiments have you done to really create? Like, to me, like, I would just get a list and some volunteers of people and try to find different. 'Cause, we could look at like tokenomics and how do you could set up your DAO and contribute, and that's all cool. But in the end, like, what would be interesting is see Juan just going around with the phone and start talking with people and videotaping that, or you, Pauline, too, posting that on Twitter, and like,
Well,
here was the
we've
conversation.
seen examples of people doing this on social media.
What was that?
We've seen examples of people doing this on social media already.
Yeah, but you guys are founders, right?
Yeah.
That you guys should be doing it. You like, right? So I kind of had a failed startup, and I know I didn't get to the point of funding phase because actually didn't want to actually raise money. I knew that was just going to be a pain in my ass. I wanted to bootstrap as much as I could.
Mhm.
But I think, as founders, you got to have a skin in the game as much as you want. That you guys need to be going out there and filming, getting these conversations up, building that Twitter. Like, to me, it's all about the message and marketing. Like, from the last conversation, are you guys able to get out there and show that your skin is in the game? So I'm not sure if you guys are doing this full time or if you already have some funding to supplement you, but like, I think I looked at your Twitter. I think I connected you on Twitter. Like, my Twitter profile sucks ass because I honestly actually avoid a lot of social media because I think they add more work to my life than actually enrich it. So I'm kind of like loath to get into crypto Twitter because I'm like, oh my god, do I really need to get into crypto Twitter? Apparently you do. A bit loath to do that. I may go and find some. I may go and hire somebody to do that for me. um, just because I think it adds noise in my head, and I don't like to think like that. But I think with, especially for you guys, you need to hit the streets, video, and seeing and test that out, and show like, okay, for this experiment, we're having a conversation here, like, maybe you try it with a cup of coffee, you give them a cup of coffee and then you talk. Maybe it's in a, and I'm unfamiliar with the Paris structure, like if you have like homeless shelters and meal, place. But just start having those authentic conversations and post it online, get that validation, get the feedback, and then I'm sure you'll get. I think as great as your project is, it scares me in the fact that it's so ambitious that I'm not even sure that, like, I'd be like, wow, like I wouldn't even know where to begin, right? And I think I'm not sure if you've had anybody else offering to join, um, and whatnot. But to me, I'm like, wow, that's big, and I think it sells the heart and minds. But um, how do you get to that level? And I definitely think a grassroots level of how you just showing yourselves out there, um, and putting it out there. So I don't know. I'm just talking.
You don't know how you would begin, but you are already talking with us, and this conversation are very important, really, really, really important. And it's like people think that we didn't begin to because the platform doesn't exist yet. People think it didn't start, but the project has already started, and it is alive with these conversations that we have with everybody. And it's so interesting because we already have societal conversation that is very important and I think impactful. So it's the first step, yeah, for us.
To me, it's a. So I know Juan and Pauline, you guys are more read than I am. But you've read *Sapiens*?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Mm.
So they talk about the transition of humans looking out for themselves, like in the village, right? The village would be the social support structure, and nowadays transitioning to the state being that support structure. And I think there's a variety of economic and social reasons behind that. But I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to take a step back and create that village support structure again, which I think is innate to how we've evolved as creatures, right? And I think there are some really authentic social cues that could be. But the problem is in this state model where we've got healthcare, we've got insurance, we've got corporate jobs that could take care of us. This takes up a lot of time, right? If you read in the book, like they talk about how pre and post agricultural, like we think about like, oh, of course when we learned how to farm it was better. Like we've got much more food available per capita, per person. Like when we figured out how to cultivate corn or wheat or rice, right? We stood still. We didn't need to be nomadic wanderers anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the point that Noel, the author, makes is that were we necessarily happier in that agricultural change? And he says no. By all means, we were not. We were suffering. We were grinding away in the fields 12 hours a day. Sure, the lords and the people that eventually became, from that land base to the people at top were, I think, better off because they could draw on the, and that's kind of how I think you start developing your centralized, model in things. But he said that, the hunter-gatherers, while they may not have had consistent food supplies, like they couldn't stock up on grains and corn and wheat, they had plenty of time to have recreation. They had plenty of time they had a much more varied diet that once they overcame a certain critical age, I think once they, lived past, 20 or 30, they lived to their 60s or 70s, right? In the wild, they're very hardy. And I think the challenge that you're facing now is that in the state-run corporate, everything, people say, oh, I don't have enough time. Well, we don't have enough time because we're working for this corporation. Agreed. We got to pay our internet. We got to pay our phone, car, vacation home, whatever, right? People are very time poor. What you're asking is a very, I think, time-intensive skill that I think that's going to be your biggest friction, right? Now, can they recreate? So I think the value, in order for them to commit that time, there has to be a super, super compelling like narrative about how it's providing them, this great universal human connection, right? Which is innate in everybody.
Yes.
And the problem is, I think most people aren't going to be natural like therapists or people to draw out the conversation. The reason why we were picked for Colonel in one of the interview, I haven't confirmed or denied, but I think one of the metrics they looked at when they interviewed for Colonel was your ability to talk on a video call. Because if you didn't talk on a video call, there wasn't going to be a lot of great interaction there, right?
Of course.
So when you have these people who are helping out, like there's going to be your quiet volunteer that may be just uncomfortable talking. They may be great like on the back end side, but so the people that do these interviews, I think you're going to have. And I think they're the people who are going to get the most out of it. You're going to get a secondary for people watching the videos, but even then, like how curated that video are? You're going to see a 20-minute like droning monologue of people watching this or not? Does that video have to be edited and chopped up? Well, maybe not. I don't know, right? I think until you. I'm always about like lean testing. Like we can theorize as much as you want, but until you actually test something and validate and interview and going out. And I think your mechanic is going to be a lot of legwork. A lot of legwork, but that also could create some really authentic narrative to get funding or building that story.
Yes, we want to create a research group for this recording conversation and do what you are saying, like testing it, and it's why we create this junto today to talk about it. And yes, I can't wait to test things and to continue to have this conversation about conversation, because it's so interesting. And we talked today a lot about what works and how it's easy to talk with unknown people, but when the time comes to record, it's not something that people get used to do. Instead of journalists does that a lot, and we have to learn from each other to understand how we can create a safe space to share these conversations, because they are really important for our society. We don't have to keep that for us.
A couple things. So talking to strangers, so people have, like I've mentioned, people that's kind of a hobby of mine, and people make fun of me, but there apparently is some true psychological, like people who talk to random people, or they say they're happier. I think I'm happy. Maybe I'm self-delusional. That being and but there's also, maybe you could look at a patron model. So I don't know if with like YouTube, a patron model is that you as a creator, people will just pay you money directly to create content on YouTube. And then these conversations are private, because there may be some sensitive information that you just don't want to be sharing with the world. Like, how do you create that safe space? Like, would I wanted all these like juntos to be recorded and published on YouTube? Maybe probably not, right? I think it depends. But I think the really, really deep ones you definitely don't want published. But maybe it's just a private channel that people. So I think we have that kind of sensitivity, but that's actually the best content that you probably do want to kind of publicize. And along the lines of a decentralized model, maybe it's the patron model. Like I said before, maybe it's a classroom. So you mentioned that you want to hit like a $2,000 a goal minimum. I was kind of doing the math in my head. Like if you're doing 2,000 minimum, like even like I think most people wouldn't balk at like $10, 20, maybe 50, but like at $100 a month, like that's when like, okay, that's a pretty serious commitment. So to even fund one person, you'd have to get like 20 people at $100 a month. And looking at like a classroom model, right? Like if you have like kids just fundraise and bringing things, like I think it'd be pretty easy for kids to bring in $10 a month, $100 a month for class of like 20 or 30 kids. That might be pushing it a bit. Like the teacher would have to be invested, so you would almost have to have a whole school worth of kids to generate two grand a month for one individual. Right. Now keep in mind there are 30,000 schools in the U.S., but I know there's a lot more than 30,000 homeless people in the world, right? So I'm just trying to I'm trying to think like maybe people are sponsoring a delegate, like a patron, who then sponsors like various homeless people that they maintain that direct, genuine contact with. So
they're sponsoring who, the homeless person, or
they would sponsor the delegate because that's who's creating the content. In the end, majority of funds will be going to the homeless person.
Okay.
Right, but there still has to be that in real life connection, right? There has to be that one-to-one, unless you have some kiosk or some robot that they come to, which makes it a little less but that could be possible too. Maybe so there's a thing called StoryCorps. I don't know if you've heard of that. And National Public Radio here.
StoryCorps?
Yeah.
Corpse.
StoryCorps. Well, yeah.
Yes.
Right. It's NPR.
Andy shared with us something about this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you get an